future of Pennsylvania's aviation and aerospace economy lives at the intersection of innovation and workforce development. Pennsylvania already supports more than 200,000 aviation jobs. PA's 120 public use airports generate $34.1 billion in annual economic impact. 17,000 new aerospace positions are coming to Pennsylvania by 2034. Worldwide, the industry needs 1.4 million new professionals in the next decade. In the next 10 years, the majority of America's 206,000 aircraft mechanics will reach the retirement age. And aviation is no longer just about airplanes. 7.1 million acres of Pennsylvania farmland, more than 15 million acres of forest, 103,000 miles of pipelines and high-voltage transmission lines, 32,000 bridges, $42 billion in annual construction. Every acre, every mile, every structure needs skilled drone operators to map, manage, and maintain them. Aerium and its collaborative partners are building this workforce, a network of nearly 100 partners across 14 Pennsylvania regions. Pennsylvania's first FAA-authorized BVLOS medical drone delivery. Pennsylvania's, and likely America's, first agriculture and forestry drone operator certification CTE course. 14 regional hubs supported by Aerium sites in Wilkinsburg, Johnstown, and soon the Lehigh Valley. This work takes partnerships at every level from Johnstown to Harrisburg to Washington, D.C. We are honored to welcome Congressman Dr. John Joyce, Pennsylvania's 13th District.
Hi, I'm Congressman John Joyce. Over the years, I've had the privilege to wear several different hats, but one of them has always stayed constant. My belief that the people of Western Pennsylvania deserve world-class opportunities. And right now, something extraordinary is happening right here in our own backyard. Aerium has established itself as a national leader in aviation and aerospace education. This is an ecosystem where education, industry, and innovation have come together to drive real economic development. This was not a coincidence. Aerium built the foundation first. Dr. Larry Knowlton established a statewide network of nearly 100 partner schools, CTE programs, colleges, and businesses across Pennsylvania and across the United States. That pipeline is why companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing Defense, and BAE Systems are paying attention to what's happening right here today. And when you build the workforce, industry follows. This year, I want to highlight one of the many groundbreaking Aerium initiatives that is changing the way Pennsylvania operates. For the farmers and rural families of Cambria, Bedford, Fulton, Huntington counties, Aerium is launching Pennsylvania's first agricultural and forestry drone operation CTE certification program. This program will bolster innovation and career opportunities directly to our farming communities. And here's a proof that this entire ecosystem is working. Earlier this year, Horizon Aerobotics, a Houston-based autonomous drone intelligence company, chose to establish their primary U.S. remote operations right here in Cambria County. They didn't choose Silicon Valley. They chose us. They chose us because the innovation and workforce development, the foundation that Aerium has built under the leadership of Dr. Knowlton, allows 250 high-skilled jobs to be coming to our district. The standard is being set here. What we've built in the Southern Alleghenies is a blueprint. And as your representative in Congress, I will keep working to support initiatives like this, the ones that lift up rural voices, the ones that create good jobs and prove that innovation doesn't only happen in big cities, it happens right here. Congratulations, Dr. Knowlton, and to the entire Aerium team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Joyce, for your partnership and your leadership. For the next 2 days, the people who build Pennsylvania's aviation and aerospace economy are in this room, and we're shaping its future. Welcome to the 2026 Aerium Spring Innovation Summit. Please welcome Aerium Executive Director Glenn Ponis.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Lame, sorry, I was a teacher. Let's try that again. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much. Welcome to the 2026 Aerium Innovation Summit. And thank you for being here with us at this fourth Spring Summit. It's incredible to think about that 4 years ago, this room didn't exist. This was just an idea in some people's head, and look at where we are today. Now, this year is going to be a little bit different. We're focusing squarely on two things at this event: the innovation that's reshaping aviation and aerospace, and what industry must do to prepare the Pennsylvania workforce that will turn that innovation into reality. Now, we're not ignoring educators. In fact, in the audience, many of the top education leaders in the state are here. And some of the speakers you'll hear from tomorrow are educators who are already turning that innovation into reality, partnering with businesses to build their local workforce and grow their local economy. And our second annual Fall Summit, in collaboration with the Aviation Council of Pennsylvania, will be a celebration of aviation education and workforce development. It will also be a call to action for educators, educational leaders, businesses, and government statewide. But this summit focuses on how business and industry across the Commonwealth are leveraging innovation and workforce development in tandem to grow our state's economy. And what better place to meet than Johnstown Airport here on this beautiful sunny day, right? Another beautiful day in Johnstown, where the lessons we are all learning while operating at the intersection of innovation and workforce development are spurring a revolution in regions across the Commonwealth. Now, we have an exciting lineup for today in our opening session, but I want to get started because I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to recognize the architect of this ecosystem that you see around you here at Johnstown Airport. Long before anyone was talking about advanced air mobility in Pennsylvania, one person saw what the John Murtha Johnstown Cambria County Airport could become. After being introduced to aviation by his son Corbin, he caught that same aviation bug that we all share. But he took it one step further. He saw runways where others saw rust. He saw a workforce where others saw a labor shortage. He saw a national hub where others saw just another regional airport. Ladies and gentlemen, my boss, my colleague, my friend, Aerium Board Chair, Dr. Larry Knowlton.
Well, thank you, Glenn. And it's pretty hard to follow Glenn. I did drink a Red Bull before I started, so I'll try to get the energy level up to Glenn's level. And welcome everybody here to 2026 Aerium Innovation Summit. We're extremely excited about this. And this summit is about the next chapter that we're doing. And you'll hear us talk a lot about this, but not what we hope to build, but what we're already scaling. And I think if you look at Aerium and what we're scaling and what we've built and what is going to continue to build is where we're so excited. You will see next year the difference we were, just like we're seeing this year from last year. So 3 years ago, the conversation in this hangar right here was about the possibility. There were many of us that were here then, and we were talking about the possibilities in Johnstown, but also in the state of Pennsylvania that have led to national discussions. And today, the conversation is about accelerating all of that. The numbers are real. The companies that are involved are real, and they're here. And the workforce is being built with Aerium's guidance and assistance. And the country is starting to pay attention to what we're doing. And we've noticed that with what has been awarded to the state of Pennsylvania, which is called the EIPP. And you'll hear more about that later. However, none of this happens alone. And this has been really about a team. Although we can attribute it to individuals, it really is about a team and a collaboration. And that has been the success of Aerium, is that willingness to engage everybody and acknowledge everybody's success in this. Before I go any further, I want to thank the people that made all of this possible today. First, to our legislators and our legislative leaders, and to the Shapiro-Davis administration, have been extremely supportive and helpful, and we thank them for that support that has been given in everything we build here. I want to acknowledge the dignitaries and elected officials that are either going to be here or are here. U.S. Senator Dave McCormick, who will be here tomorrow, very excited that he himself was interested in coming here. Senator Wayne Langerholt is serving as Pennsylvania's 35th Senatorial District and Pennsylvania's Senate Majority Whip. We have Senator Judy Ward. I'm not sure if she came in yet, but she's serving Pennsylvania's 30th Senatorial District and chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, and friends with Congressman Joyce, as you saw on the screen, and myself. Representative Jim Rigby, representing Pennsylvania's 71st Legislative District. President Commissioner Scott Hunt, Cambria County. And we have Vice President Commissioner Keith Rager. I know I saw everybody here. And we have Commissioner Tom Chernisky of Cambria County. And I'm glad Tom's not taking any pictures of me here at the moment. They're always bad, Tom, sorry. Representatives from the Federal Aviation Administration. I know my son will be flying in here probably right now doing a check ride with FAA staff on board. So this is very exciting today. Representatives from the PA Department of Community and Economic Development, who have been a great support of Johnstown Airport. Representatives from Ben Franklin Technology Partners, and thank you, Jose, for the group. Representatives from the Johnstown Police Department, including Chief of Police Mark Britton, which I think we'll have more exciting discussions later with. From the AAM site designation to the funding for Drone 814, which either you've heard about or have seen, to the policy framework that lets us compete with any state in the country, which was the EIPP, you have been with us every step of the way. To the Aerium board, thank you for the steady governance, and the Aerium board has just been phenomenal at helping guide Aerium in its mission. And to the Aerium staff make it look like we're huge, and there's basically five people doing it and 2 full-time staff. So they do a Herculean lift that is unbelievable. And thank you guys for showing up every day. And the energy Glenn brings, you can see, is the energy that's driving Aerium, and that is what makes it exciting. I don't know how you guys do it, but whatever you do, just don't stop. Yeah, it's infectious. Their support isn't symbolic. It's what allows us to put this room together year after year. I also want to acknowledge our sponsors. And I don't know if they're on the screen, but St. Francis University, who was there from the beginning with me and my son. The Pilot Mind Drone Academy, thank you, Dr. Dusler, and Verigy as our sponsors. ATA Aviation, Johnstown Airport, Kongsberg, McElwain Charters and Tours, and thank you, Tim, for providing the busing today and the transportation. The Hoxton Agency, providing aviation insurance. St. Vincent College Aviation Management Program, and we just loved what St. Vincent has done and accomplished. And continued supporters, Community College of Allegheny County, Lockheed Martin. We saw the C-130 out there today. Thank you guys for bringing that in. That is phenomenal. University of Pittsburgh Center for Military Medicine Research. Thank you, Dr. Porpatich. And making Pitch Summit possible. The Pitch Summit is extremely exciting, something we were so excited last year to get the youth coming to bring innovation to Johnstown and present it. And we want to thank our partners for making that possible. Ameriserve Financial, Ben Franklin Technology Partners. Thank you, Jose, for helping that last year when it was just a little bit of a brainstorm. Mission Critical Solutions has become an excellent partner in our mission. And the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown. Thank you, Skip. And thank you to all of them and to our friend-level sponsors on the screen. There it is. Behind me, we couldn't do any of this without all of you guys. I want to say one more thing before we move on. We have something special right here in Johnstown, not because of luck, but because we have the right mission, the right mix of high performance, low ego teammates, and who see the forest among the trees. The ecosystem we built and the strategy driving it is world-class, and we're just getting started. We simply could not do this without our home-based federal and state delegates, and that has been just top-notch. I mean, in all the work we've done across the state, locally here we have some of the top leaders in the state and the country. Which brings me to our next speaker. Senator Wayne Langerholt was elected to the Pennsylvania Senate in 2016, and he is now serving his third term representing the 35th District, all of Cambria and Clearfield counties in Western Center County. He is the Senate Majority Whip and the former chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. He is the architect of the legislation that established Pennsylvania's very first advanced air mobility site right here at Johnstown Cambria County Airport. So we are very excited to be the very first AAM site in Pennsylvania, and really a first of its kind. He signed that into the November 2025 state budget. He is also the sponsor of SB 468, the bill authorizing PA to enter into interstate agreements for drone research and development. And most importantly to me, he has been with Aerium from the very first summit, and actually before that. Groundbreakings, ribbon cuttings, check presentations, every major milestone. When we needed a champion in Harrisburg, Senator Langerholt was there. And please welcome the senator and our friend. Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. You know you've made it when you have walk-up music. So that's exciting. Maybe next year we could get a smoke machine and really kind of go with it. But no, in all seriousness, folks, look at how far we've come in just 4 short years. I remember sitting in those meetings talking about just the location, talking about the timing. You know, we do this in collaboration also with a Showcase for Commerce to really highlight our region and what we have become. And it is very, very exciting to be here and to see this just growing in just huge, huge implications. I can remember when we first started talking about this 4 years ago. At the time, I was the Senate chairman of the Transportation Committee. I've served about a few years there, and then I was recently elected into leadership as the Senate Majority Whip. So that my colleague, Senator Judy Ward, has taken over the committee. I'm still on the committee and still involved. But really, Johnstown is the epicenter of aviation, and it's evident in the collaboration across so many levels here today and just throughout the year. It's exciting to be here and to recognize the potential that we have. I can remember when I first became chair of the Transportation Committee, kind of trying to get a foothold on all that was involved with it. You know, it's such a wide range of things, from roads and bridges, multimodal, aviation, and what have you. And looking at the region, you know, looking collectively at the Commonwealth, how do we advance transportation interests, but also looking, I'll be quite honest, selfishly at the 35th District and at this region, how can we impact that? And believe me, there's no shortage of people when they found out that you became the chairman of the Transportation Committee. They have plenty of ideas on how to spend money and how to get involved, you know, from roads, you know, the Route 56, which is important, Route 219, which is important. Roads and bridges are important, but I looked kind of intrinsically at what this region had and how could we capitalize. And right here in my backyard, I live in Richland Township, is this airport that we owe so much to our late Congressman, John Murtha, for advocating for and for what this is for this region. It's really a world-class airport. So I'm thinking, how can we capitalize on that? And when you have a partner like Dr. Knowlton, it's very, very easy to do. I always say there's no shortage of people knocking on my door at the Capitol or here in my district offices asking for state money, for investment, for projects. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, when Larry comes to me and says, hey, we need this or this, it's ready to go. It's shovel ready. It's been thought out. It's been vetted. It's been, you know, the subjects of 5 a.m. emails or texts, you know, thinking this. It's well thought out, and it will benefit the region, and it's easy to advocate for those dollars. So as far as accomplishments over the years, what we've done, state dollars, that is a big part of it. So I can tell you that since I was elected in 2017, I have been able to bring in state dollars about $12.25 million to this airport and aviation related. And just in the past 5 years, been able to bring $8.9 million for aviation. And those are dollars well spent. And you can see that in the growth of Aerium, and you can see that in what other companies are noticing. They're seeing it. They're taking foothold. Just by way, any first-timers here for Aerium today? Okay, not bad. We got a few, maybe a quarter of the room or so. You see, and welcome to Johnstown. Is your first time in Johnstown? Anybody first time in Johnstown? All right. Well, welcome to Johnstown. It is a rich, rich history and a great region. I was born and raised here. I'm raising my family here. My wife and I have 3 daughters. They're all in college now, which is awesome for me. Good times. Actually, on a side note, people said, "Oh, you're empty nesters now. How is that? Are you okay?" I'm like, "It's great. My wife and I are having a great time." They're all home now from college, but we love having them at home, but also enjoy seeing the path that they're taking. So state dollars and state investment, that is easy to advocate for because you're seeing that's what state dollars should be used for. Not to be something that sustains business. The government can't run business, but for the seed money or for the investment to get that over the hurdle. And what we have been able to do here over the past several years is exciting, and I'm very excited to see how it continues to grow. On the legislative side, Dr. Knowlton talked a little bit about some things. One of the first bills that I was able to get across the finish line was for the airport land development zones, which are kind of similar to a KOZ, if you're familiar with that, a Keystone Opportunity Zone, where if a company comes in, they won't pay state taxes for a period of 10 years. The Airport Land Development Zone kind of works in that area, but the employers that come in will not have to pay payroll taxes for a period of time. So that's just a little piece of the puzzle to kind of get companies to recognize and to relocate here. Also, the Interstate Compact, Senate Bill 468, which is in the House now. We passed that out of the Senate. That is a vital piece of legislation that we want to ensure that the state can enter into interstate agreements with other entities. If you'll see, I'm sure Tony McCloskey will be here at some point. He's kind of a one-man show in PennDOT, and we're trying to change that to get more staff here on the aviation side, but to enable the state then to get into other agreements. One thing that surprised me early on in the discussions here with Aerium and seeing the collaboration with other states was with the state of Alaska and what they were doing. And I actually had the opportunity 2 years in a row. I was invited by the governor of Alaska to go speak at the Global Autonomous Systems Conference on drone research and development. And that kind of really laid the groundwork to see what we can do and what can all be possible. There are so many applications for this technology across so many levels, and I'm sure there are things that haven't even been thought about yet. So it's exciting to be a part of that. We're looking to get that across the finish line. Hopefully, this budget, we will be able to get that signed into law. I'll be back in Harrisburg here next week and pretty much every week after that as we have a fiscal year date of July 1st for the state budget. I'm an optimistic person, but let's don't hold your breath on that. But we'll see how that transpires. And then also, as Dr. Knowlton indicated, was able to secure the Advanced Air Mobility site in the code of last year's budget, and that created the first site, and it is right here in Johnstown. And it's easy when you're advocating for that all of these individuals, the state recognizes what they're doing. The state recognizes the work and how they get things done, quite frankly. So that was exciting. That will lead to more testing and integration hubs and allow really this region to benefit from that across a wide range of areas. And you'll see that, I'm sure, as Aerium, as the conference continues here throughout the next couple of days. And it really signals to the state and the nation, quite frankly, that this is where it's happening. There's so many levels, and it's important that this is not just one pot that we're talking about, right? We're talking about wide-ranging applications across a multitude of government, of education, of workforce development, of private companies investing here, and it's exciting to see that come to fruition. And on the workforce aspect and on the education aspect, we are showing this region, this state, that there are tremendous opportunities for our young people to stay in this region. So Western Pennsylvania, Camber County, it's no stranger that we are losing population, but this will stem and turn the tide and ensure that you can get a world-class education here, you can be in the pipeline, and you can graduate and you can have a family-sustaining career here in aviation. And that is, what's important about that is that just trickles down to everything else. And then you're investing in this community, you're buying a house, you're helping with the tax base, you are helping with businesses, you're helping with commerce. And that is exciting, and I'm proud to be a part of all of this. I am excited for the conference. I thank you for the opportunity to address this, and we are just getting started. Thank you all.
So if you haven't figured this out, the theme this year is scalability and looking at a state level. And as we look to that, there are two organizations that we seek to work with from a business partnership that we believe are some of the strongest partners that we can have. The first of those is the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. The PMA is the voice of the companies that forge the components, assemble the airframes, machine the parts, and maintain the aircraft that fly over this Commonwealth every single day. If it's built in Pennsylvania, it's built by a PMA member. And if it flies in Pennsylvania, a PMA member has had a hand in it. David Taylor, the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, had an event that he had to be at this morning. He will be here tomorrow. He was supposed to speak this morning. You will get to see him tomorrow. But I did want to acknowledge him because, again, the notion that our manufacturers are standing behind us is critically important. So if the PMA represents the people who build Pennsylvania, our next speaker speaks for the people who power its economy. Bill Miller is the Vice President of External Affairs for the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. It is the largest broad-based business advocacy organization in the Commonwealth. From the Chamber's Aerospace and Aviation Day at the state capitol to the policy fights that shape how, where, and whether Pennsylvania companies will grow, Bill is in the middle of it all. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bill Miller.
Thanks, Glenn. On behalf of the PA Chamber, we are just thankful to the Aerium team for organizing and hosting this and for the partnership that we have together. All the partners, employers in this room, and the innovators that are really making all of these opportunities possible. A few weeks ago, the PA Chamber partnered with Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis, Aerium, the Keystone Space Collaborative, for Aerospace and Aviation Day at the Capitol. We brought together students, policymakers, military leaders, manufacturers, entrepreneurs, and technology companies to showcase where the industry is headed and why Pennsylvania is positioned to lead. And frankly, we're in a position to lead thanks to the leadership of all of the people on stage here today. What's happening here in Johnstown is a continuation of that same conversation. I also just want to thank and recognize not only Dr. Knowlton, Glenn, I see Pat McCann in the audience from Lockheed, and many others in this room who have helped contribute to that effort and continue pushing the industry forward every day. Too often, people still think of aerospace and aviation as a niche sector. The numbers tell a very different story. In Pennsylvania, aerospace and aviation supports roughly 43,000 jobs, generates $19.3 billion in economic output, and contributes $7.3 billion to the state's annual GDP. This is a major economic driver for our Commonwealth, a growing one, and we see real momentum. Across the state, companies and institutions are investing in the next generation of aviation, robotics, autonomy, and advanced manufacturing, thanks in parts to the efforts of companies, organizations like Aerium. And this year's Aerospace and Aviation Day, Aerium's work on Beyond Visual Line of Sight, or BVLOS, drone infrastructure was highlighted as an example of the kind of innovation that's happening right here in Pennsylvania. What's especially important about Aerium's work is that it's practical. It's focused on solving real-world challenges around infrastructure, safety, scalability, and commercial development. That matters because the future of aviation is no longer theoretical. It's happening now, and if Pennsylvania wants to compete for the jobs and investment that come with the future, we need to create an environment where innovation can move at the speed of the aerospace industry. That means getting policy right. The PA Chamber continues to advocate for policies that makes Pennsylvania more competitive, including meaningful tax reform, permitting modernization, and long-term energy strategy focused on reliability, infrastructure, and innovation. Because whether we're talking about aerospace, AI, advanced manufacturing, energy production, or logistics, the formula is the same. Companies will invest in the states where they can build, scale, and hire efficiently. The good news is Pennsylvania has all the ingredients to lead. We have world-class universities and research institutions, many of them here with us today, a very strong manufacturing base, skilled workers, strategic geography, and communities like Johnstown that understand how to adapt, innovate, and compete. The question is whether we are willing to match those advantages with policies that support growth and investment. The good news is that events like this show there's real alignment between industry leaders, policymakers, workforce partners, and regional stakeholders. Because leadership in aerospace and aviation is not just about the technology, it's about economic opportunity, workforce development, and supporting the jobs that industries can strengthen communities across Pennsylvania for decades to come. The PA Chamber is proud to be part of that effort, and we look forward to continuing to work alongside all of you to help make Pennsylvania the most competitive state in the nation for investment and innovation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bill. When the talent pool that builds and flies the future also has to respond when something goes wrong, you need legislators who understand both sides of that equation. You need people who champion legislation that supports them. Representative Jim Rigby is one of them. 4 decades as a volunteer firefighter, police officer, and Ferndale Chief of Police. 29 years with the American Red Cross. He graduated right here from Ferndale High School and attended the police academy at the Greater Johnstown Career and Technology Center, that same campus that's still building Pennsylvania's aviation workforce today. Now Deputy Republican Whip in the Pennsylvania House, and one of Drone 814's most natural and passionate champions. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Representative Jim Rigby.
Thank you. Hey, welcome. Let me get my notes out. You know, talk about 40 years running in, fires, police. I mean, incidents are crazy. You don't know what's happening. The technology today, if we would have had years ago, probably would have saved a lot of lives. And the fact that we're doing it now, you know, Drone 814, I've been a huge cheerleader for. And I remember 4 years ago when we first started talking about the technology, and Dr. Knowlton, you get excited listening to Dr. Knowlton talk. He says, we're going to have these things going. We'll be able to fly without sight of view. How are we doing that? Well, guess what? We are now doing that. It's happening right now, that we can dispatch. You talk about geography, and we got problems getting ambulance crews into the rural areas. We need blood. We need anti-venoms, whatever it may be. We can dispatch 814 drone and have them there in minutes, where it's going to take EMS, fire, police, maybe a half an hour to get to them. So this technology is happening now, and it started right here. That's the greatest part. And I remember, Doctor, you said, I envisioned an interstate in the sky. And it stuck with me, and we are now getting there. We started out with some roads, and we're going to open it up to some highways, and we'll have the interstates very soon. You know, we want to talk about workforce for the emergency response crews that are there. It's the same thing, the life fight pilots, drone operators, the technicians who's going to keep the aircrafts flying. You know, these programs have all been seated right here. Greater Johnstown Career and Technology, St. Francis, Mount Aloysius, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and Pitt Johnstown. Those are the training grounds. As was mentioned earlier, you know, we want to keep our youth and our talent here. And we are laying out the carpet to do that. we're going to see a very bright future with drone technologies and what's happening here, and we're on the map. We're already there. Anything that is small enough can be delivered by an unmanned aerial vehicle and faster than a first responder can arrive. Again, we mentioned blood products, AEDs, antivenoms, all dispatched by drone, and it closes the gap a geography creates. I also said on Veterans and Emergency Preparedness, I chaired the subcommittee on emergency response readiness, and again, drones and the unmanned aircraft systems are a very integral part of public safety infrastructure. It's not a novelty. This is happening. This is real. We're not talking the Walmart drones that you go play with. Matter of fact, we had the air ambulance up here last year on display across at the fire hall. You want to see talk about technology, where you can take a drone and fly it in and load a patient and take him right to the hospital. And traffic's not as bad here, but could you imagine like a New York or a California, the minutes, the hours that technology could do and could save? Again, we're talking about saving lives, multiple lives. So again, the project is addressing the workforce challenges, cultivating a talent pipeline, not only for our defense community, but for the aviation community on a national scale. And most importantly, students will be the beneficiaries of these jobs, and they'll happen right here. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Representative Rigby. Everything that you've heard this morning so far, think about it. The policy wins, the workforce thesis, the manufacturing backbone, the public safety payoff was all built for a moment exactly like this one. Our final speaker of the morning session is the proof that it's working. Denver Hopkins is the co-founder and CEO of Horizon Aerobotics. That's a Houston, Texas-based autonomous drone intelligence company. It's servicing Fortune 100 companies and federal agencies. Earlier this year, on February 4th, Horizon Aerobotics chose Johnstown to anchor its primary national remote operations center. 247 jobs, 9,000 daily beyond visual line of sight drone flights at a national scale. Happening not in Houston, Texas, but right here at the Johnstown Airport campus. Ladies and gentlemen, Denver Hopkins.
Thank you, Glenn. It's so great to be back here in Pennsylvania. It's so great to be back here at this airport in this community that is increasingly starting to feel like home to us. It is increasingly becoming home to us. I think I was here just a few weeks ago. I expect I will be here about that soon again. By the way, I'm really glad that the weather did not disappoint, and that's not a joke. Yesterday on the way in, I was telling our team, it's not always like this. It was a beautiful day yesterday, and I think they were confused because we bring back lots of photos and conversations about it. But I'm not kidding. That is one of the reasons. People ask us all the time, why Pennsylvania? Why Johnstown? And we'll get to the most important reasons, but there's some very practical reasons too, and some of those are, and we've been able to bring members of our engineering team. We've brought another, I guess, 6 people this time. Not everybody gets to be here right now. Some are still chained to their workbenches. But we really want them to see the environment here. This is what the real world looks like. Operating here, if we can stand up operations that work reliably in the kinds of weather and conditions and terrain and everything that we find here, we'll be able to operate just about anywhere in the nation. And so for very practical reasons, this has been great for us. But there's so many more reasons that I would say are much more important, and we'll get to those. Right now, our industry, I'll say broadly aviation, but narrowing a sector of advanced air mobility, and even inside of that, our business, the drone industry, is at a very important inflection point. It was almost exactly 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years in June. It was 10 years ago that the Part 107 regulations were released. That opened up pathways to a whole new industry that didn't exist, to commercial drone industry as we know it. And in that space, last check, I haven't checked the numbers recently, but a 28, 30+ billion dollar industry has grown up in a very short time. And the industry is at another inflection point right now. because there's new regulations known as the Part 108 regulations that are to enable beyond visual line of sight flight and operations at scale. Also, last year, the administration in the White House issued an executive order prioritizing beyond visual line of sight flights at scale as a national priority. So we stand at a very interesting time right now in our industry, a time of tremendous possibility. We've encountered as a young business, trying to grow a startup, raising capital, trying to sell a vision. Early on, we encountered people who didn't quite understand what we were talking about. We're talking about this future that's beyond Part 108, that's beyond visual line of sight, that's flying drones thousands of flights a day from a remote operations center. And, at the time, we didn't even know it would be in Pennsylvania. And it was very hard to impart that vision to some people. But, as things are moving forward, they're starting to see it. And certainly another thing that we encountered in trying to sell that vision as a young startup, trying to capitalize a business, for instance, that's something you do when you start a company, is talking to people about our vision and what we were trying to do was often met with blank stares of disbelief, and in large part because of the scale and the difficulty of what it meant to put all of that into play. There were regulatory barriers, there's a workforce that doesn't exist, there's training, curriculum that has to be developed that doesn't exist, the technology that we had to develop. All of this caused us to be met with some pretty doubting and blank stares early on. And they said, how are you going to do this? And the truth was at the time, determination. We're committed to this. This is what it's going to take. This is what we're going to do. But the answer is very different now, because it was maybe, 2.5 years ago or so that we came up here to a previous event just like this one. My co-founding partner, Nick Sammons, and I walked in ourselves, doubting a little bit what we would find here. And were utterly stunned and amazed at what we found. What we found in the vision of Dr. Knowlton, what we found in the leadership and the boldness of your elected leaders to get behind a vision like that, what we found in your educators, your universities, colleges in the area. We went on a world tour of this area and met a lot of not just people that accepted our vision, but people who shared our vision before we even walked through the door. And that's what's exciting to us about being here. So when people ask us why Pennsylvania, why Johnstown, it's a very easy question to answer now. When we have potential funders that we're talking to that talk about how are you going to pull off all of these things that you're taking on. This is very ambitious. We lay out a plan for exactly how we're going to do it with our friends and partners and collaborators here and elsewhere, but largely concentrated right here and even inside this room. And I'll wrap this up by saying a big part of it for us is workforce development. We have to build a workforce that doesn't exist with skills that haven't been, until fairly recently, readily available in universities and elsewhere. And so we've met some really great partners here we've been able to collaborate with. Many of you we met before we were ready for you, and I want to tell every one of you, we're still coming, we're still collaborating. I want to be very clear about that. There's more of you than there are of us right now, if I can put it that way. But those wheels are turning. We're in a transition period ourselves right now. So we are coming out of a years-long period of R&D. We've been in pilots with our largest customers, and we are moving toward the end of those pilots and into production. And into production means scaling up, in the case of one of those customers, to 500 sites over the next 2 to 3 years is what they expect of us. That's a big challenge for a company that's never done this, in an industry that's never done this, with a workforce that's never done this, So we're building the aircraft as we fly it, right? And I'm really glad to have so many people here in this community in that mission with us, because it makes it possible for us not just to be bold. You have to be bold to start a business on a dream, but to be confident that actually it really can work, and it can work because, we have great partners and friends. As I wrap up, I would like to introduce a couple of people here, because two newest members of our team, actually Chris and Bella, if you would just wave your hands over there, sorry to call you out. two newest members of our team are from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that's just the first of many. Belle actually is the newest member of our team. She is an intern, an engineering intern from St. Francis. We have a returning intern from Purdue over there, Blake, hello. Folks, these people are the future of our industry and the future of our workforce. And we're really excited to be working with partners here to help shape that workforce and then also to begin recruiting that workforce. By the way, if I haven't told you, Belle, you're a prototype. So we are prototyping everything in this business, and as we start the process, we hope you'll be with us a very long time. Chris dove in head first and made a cross-country drive on his first day of work with us about a month ago. But we're really glad to be here. We're really glad to have the partners we have here. We're looking forward to talking about both innovation and workforce development. And all the things and making new connections here as we have every time we've been here. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to meeting you all.
Denver, thanks so much. And thank you to Nick, to your team, and to all of Horizon for betting on Pennsylvania. Now, everyone in this room wants to make sure that we're going to make sure that bet pays off, right? So look at who you just heard from. Federal, state policy, regulatory, manufacturing, chamber, public safety, industry, every layer in one room in 1 hour. That machine, ladies and gentlemen, is running right here in Johnstown and with the support of everyone in this room in regions all across the Commonwealth. So what does this add up to as we go down this journey? What this adds up to is that the Southern Alleghenies is now a national reference point for how advanced aviation, workforce development, and regional economic strategy come together. 247 jobs from Horizon is today's headline. But the real story is the next 247 jobs and the next 247 after that. And that day, it's not too far from now, when someone opens up a national newspaper and reads about Pennsylvania the way they used to read about Seattle or Houston or Wichita. We're not trying to catch up to anybody. We're building a model that everyone else is going to have to study. So I want to take you on a brief journey to give you a sense of where we're going over the next 2 days. This is the road we're going to travel. Every session's been placed here for a reason. Let me walk you through it. This session was at wide angle view, and then from here we go from the ground up, literally. Our first session starts with the most foundational question in this whole industry. Where do we fly and what does it take for us to build it? You cannot have advanced aviation without infrastructure. So we start there. Then, Raul Blanco, former NASA Crew and Thermal Systems Chief, takes the lunch keynote and resets the room. Out of an engineering conversation into a human one. What does it take to perform when the environment is unforgiving and every decision matters? After lunch, our Cambria County Commissioners are going to cut the ribbon on the exhibit hall, and then we get to even more work. The afternoon walk's a deliberate staircase. Use cases first. How does technology get from R&D to enterprise? Then we scale, VLOS to BVLOS, to autonomous flight. How operations grow safely from one drone in line of sight to fleets operating BVLOS autonomously. And we'll close the day by looking at the fleet of tomorrow, the aircraft, the manufacturing, the workforce that doesn't fully exist yet but will. And by the time we walk into the exhibit hall for the reception tonight, you'll have the whole map, where we fly, why it matters, what's working, how it scales, and what comes next. Now that's the demand side. Day 2 is the supply side. Because every technology we've talked about today forces the same question on us, ladies and gentlemen. Who is going to build it, fly it, fix it, and lead it? Day 2 is going to begin to answer those questions on that same staircase. We'll open up with the foundational frame, how workforce development has to evolve as fast as technology does. Then we're going to get into the funding mechanisms, including the Educational Improvement Tax Credit Program and how the businesses in this room can turn your tax payments into trained workers. We're then going to move to proof case. We're going to move to proof. Case studies of partnerships that are already working. And that session will be led by CTE and directors that are already making it happen. And then we're going to close the summit with what we think is one of the most exciting things that Aerium has ever done. It's called the Pitch Summit, We have 4 high school and collegiate teams competing live in front of you on the stage for tomorrow for the chance to be the next Horizon Aerobotics and win a share of $20,000 in cash prizes. And then we send everyone home with a keynote from U.S. Senator Dave McCormick. 2 days, ladies and gentlemen, 1 argument. Day 1 is what we're building. Day 2 is who's going to build it. You need both or you have neither. So before we get started, I want you to look around this room one more time. Federal agencies, state and federal legislators, universities, community colleges, career and technical centers, high schools, industry, investors, military, manufacturers, emergency responders, I could go on, right? There is no excuse, and I mean this very seriously, there is no excuse for you to walk out of here without a partnership, a phone number, or an idea that you didn't have when you walked in here this morning. So I want to give you all an assignment. I'm a teacher, sorry, can't help myself. Over the next 2 days, listen hard. Ask the questions you came here to ask. Make the connections you didn't know you needed. Build the partnerships that turn into the next 247 jobs. And above all else, dream big, because the people sitting next to you can help you get there. So to close, in 2023, we stood on this very same stage for the first ever Aerium Summit, alongside our Cambria County Commissioners, President Commissioner Scott Hunt and Commissioners Tom Chernisky and Keith Rager, who have been partners since day 1. They didn't just wait to see if this would work. They bet on Aerium when we were just an idea on a whiteboard. Now, at that very first summit, those of you who are here might remember Tom Chernisky closed with a line that stuck with all of us. He said, "There is no finish line. We have a lot more to do. Let's get to it." He was right then. And if you look around this room, he's more right today. Let's get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and welcome to Summit. So it is my pleasure now to introduce our first panel. We'll be going directly into our first panel session. And our first panel session is where we fly and why we fly. So the team is going to be coming up. On the stage, you're going to go around that way. There we go. As he walks up on the stage, the first person walking up is John Eberhart. John Eberhart is the CEO and founder of ATA Aviation. Used to be a Winchester, Virginia company, and today is a Johnstown company. Another example of jobs coming to Pennsylvania. And I will turn it over to John.
Cool. Thanks, Glenn. Thank you, everybody. And I think we've got a few more panelists wandering in. All right, we got 4 out of 5. Is that Scott? We got 5 out of 5. All right, cool. So do we have a couple mics down there? Okay, great. So we're going to talk about infrastructure. What do you need to do all this stuff? Everything from small UAS up to fully autonomous, full-size cargo aircraft. So the first thing I'd like to do, though, is introduce our panelists. So if we can go left to right, starting with Craig Marcinkowski, if you gentlemen can introduce yourself.
Hi, Craig Marcinkowski. I'm the president and CEO of New Air. We're a not-for-profit in upstate New York that's been facilitating drone usage in the state for the past decade. Some touch points on infrastructure specifically up there for BVLOS flying. That was an awesome intro, by the way, and they set the stage for what we're going to be talking about. So thanks for the invite, John.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, John. My name's Dan O'Shea. I lead sales at Matrix Space. So we are a radar manufacturer. We provide sensors for low airspace awareness, everything from enabling beyond visual line of sight, AAM, as well as doing counter-drone products, drone detection, and solutions around that. So yeah, I'm excited to be part of the panel today, talk about infrastructure and scaling operations.
Thanks, Dan.
My name is Corey Harper. I work with Verigy. We are a renewable energy service company that provides energy solutions to airports nationwide, working with renewable energies, hydrogen-based, working with the airports to actually help install the infrastructure needed that will eventually fuel these aircraft. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Corey. Eric?
Did you turn me? I turned you off, sorry.
He knows what I'm going to say. Honored to be here in front of all of you. and thrilled to learn here today. I'm Eric Jacobs with Airport Monitoring Systems, and we help tell the story of aviation through data and the value and the wonder of it. We help with reducing the friction between aviation and communities. And lastly, we're really thrilled to be a partner with Aerium to help with safe interoperability of the aircraft that fly in the spaces that we're concerned about. And as a former New York State EMT, being part of Drone 814 is, and really at the end of the day, saving lives through all this is an amazing experience to be a part of. Thank you all.
Thanks, Eric. I'm Scott Drew, Executive Director at ATA Aviation, and I am attempting to help roll out digital and physical aviation infrastructure.
Thank you, Scott. And have a seat next to Eric, because I'm going to come down here. Okie dokie. All right, so we're going to kind of run this as a fireside chat. So everybody, thanks for introducing yourselves. I'll give a little bit of kind of my view of the expertise we have up here on the stage. So in addition to running New Air, Craig was also with Saab and SRC. So, and next to him is Dan, and Dan was at Iris in U Avionics before Matrix Space. So we got two guys here who know a lot about surveillance, airspace surveillance technology, right? And then we have Corey, who knows about energy and new energy sources, new propulsion as part of AAM. And we've got Eric, right, who is doing airport operations. But the other thing that Eric's very modest about, he's very involved in TRB, very involved in RTCA, knows a lot about aviation comms. And then, you know, Scott and I work together. Some of you already know him. We do a lot of, you know, the kind of knuckle dragger work of getting this stuff out in the field. And to be honest, it's really Scott doing the work, not me. So the first question, and we'll just keep this left to right thing going. So to paraphrase Edwin Starr, infrastructure. Huh, what is it good for? So you got people in AAM saying they don't need anything, right? I'm going to fly my thing, VFR, in and out. We don't need anything. So, okay, starting with Craig, left to right, you know, a couple minutes each. What do we need? Why do we need infrastructure? What do we need? Why?
No, it's a great question. It's not a simple answer, but I like the way they kicked off today, where they talked about scalability at a state level, BVLOS. You know, I like the framing too about Part 107 a decade ago. We had the FAA test sites. We're doing a bunch of testing at test sites. From a New York perspective, we focused on BVLOS a decade ago. And why were we doing that, and how were we doing that? We were using ground radars to meet the see and avoid requirement, to not need a ground observer or a chase plane to begin to do those types of flights and to begin to do that at scale. If you want, those are operations where if you're trying to do them maybe in urban areas over people, there's certain infrastructure requirements. Now you see where Part 108's coming, what type of infrastructure requirements are for that. You guys have been leading the charge on what's the minimum viable infrastructure needed. So, you know, if I'm trying to frame it around just BVLOS operations at scale, which I think was the perfect way that they started this conference, because I think that's how we should be looking at everything. What is the required infrastructure? You mentioned Iris, you mentioned UAvionics, there's cooperative, there's non-cooperative surveillance. Putting that right package together for an area, for the use cases that they need, that meets the safety and performance requirements. I mean, I think that's the holy grail of what everyone up here is trying to accomplish. We had one slant for how we were trying to do it in upstate New York with some investment from the governor. There's been a lot of other investments in corridors around the country. And I think for us to be successful as an industry, we've got to come together on what those packages are and be able to deploy them, you know, in a rapid way that is still, you know, meets what everyone thinks are safety and security requirements.
Thanks, Craig. Dan?
Yeah, we're at a really interesting point in the history of aviation technologies, right? Like legacy aviation, general aviation aircraft, commercial aviation aircraft have been operating for, you know, almost 100 years at this point, if not longer, really, if we go back to the Wright brothers. But now with the introduction of drone technologies, autonomous systems platforms, it's requiring a rethinking of how we manage the NAS. And in a lot of ways, like the thought processes are just really trying to catch up to where the technology is. So what do I mean by that? And so, when we think about, okay, what are the infrastructure requirements to support aviation at scale in a legacy sense, right? And so you have long-range radars that look up and out, right? And they provide, pretty adequate detection overall. You have ADS-B for electronic conspicuity, but that's not mandated everywhere. And now when you start to introduce new technologies, eVTOLs, smaller drones, now all of a sudden you have, a rapid increase in the number of participants in the NAS, and now deconflicting that airspace becomes a new priority. And so when we start thinking about, okay, well, what should the infrastructure look like? It should be, really focused on on being able to pull in all these new entrants into the NAS and create, safe and effective deconfliction so that we don't have drones, crashing into each other. We don't have a police drone crashing into an Amazon delivery drone. We don't have, an Amazon delivery drone crashing into a Medflight helicopter, all of those things, right? And so setting up that infrastructure, both, with a multitude of systems, but a multitude of different sensor types, all working collaboratively, is going to be an absolute imperative to make sure that the NAS remains safe, open, and accessible.
Thanks, Dan. Corey?
Yeah, we're working with airports nationwide. They're already going through a transition from the aircraft side. They've been using, let's face it, they've been using leaded fuel for the last industry to use leaded fuel is still aviation. The FAA does not do a transition fast, right? I'm sorry, the gentleman earlier said this is a niche market and it's moving at the speed of light. The FAA does not move at the speed of light. So the fuel that the aircraft are using are Jet A or Hunter low lead. It's low lead, but it's still got leaded fuels in it. Aircraft and aviation and airports are already in a transition going from fueled aircraft to electric aircraft. This presents problems for them from an infrastructure standpoint already because they're now having to provide a third fuel type that they're not used to, and it's kilowatt hours, energy, or hydrogen. From an electricity or a hydrogen standpoint, these airports, a lot of them don't have the infrastructure to actually fuel these aircraft from a manned or unmanned aircraft, from a UAV or a fixed wing single engine Cessna or a Shorts 182 or something larger scale. They don't have the infrastructure to actually be able to provide fuel to that. So there's corridors being set up. I like the analogy earlier of highways. There's routes being set up to where people can go to fly 200 miles apart, 250 miles apart. What's the length of those aircraft? Hydrogen will probably give them longer run times than electricity will, less weight, from the battery perspective. But not every manufacturer is going to design to the fuel that aircraft or that airport has specifically put in. So where one airport may have a need for hydrogen production, another airport may have a need for energy storage, for energy charging from an energy standpoint, and not have the infrastructure from the grid to actually get those kilowatt hours and those kilowatts to the aircraft or the device that actually needs to be able to utilize it to charge to be able to be ready to fly. So, airports are investing in this, and they're investing in it hopefully smartly, being ready for it, but maybe not investing millions and millions of dollars for maybe they're not in one of the corridors. Maybe they're not one of the test sites. Being able to be ready for it, but not invest every bit of retirement dollars, so to speak, investing smartly in the infrastructure. So.
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to interject here for a second because for those of you who know me, you know that I like to make these pithy, outrageous statements, so I'm going to make one. We are never going to use unleaded fuel in aviation. It's never going to happen. And the reason is, I remember being at NASAO 2 years ago. UND presented the results of a study. They showed after a year of using unleaded in their flight school fleet that they were already having problems with valve seating. The challenges that we've been trying to go to unleaded for 20 years, and the fact is with electric and hydrogen coming, right, we're just going to make the leap. We're going to make the leap, and we'll obviously still use Jet A, and they'll still be leaded for traditional piston aircraft, and that will just in 25 years it's going to be for hobbyists. And so I think it's a reasonable assumption that we're never using unleaded fuel. So, Eric, I'm going to pivot a little bit because of time. So the next question is around what do airports need to do to get ready? And you live at airports. So Eric, what are the things that you're seeing airports need to get ready for this new world?
Sure. And building off of what's already been said and challenging everybody here to put their thinking caps on. So airport infrastructure, certainly power is one. It's a big investment, bringing three-phase in for that infrastructure. Some of the big challenges include cybersecurity, right? From the aircraft perspective, from the comms perspective, from the airport perspective, right? We need to still have a better approach to cyber to keep everybody safe. Some of the other issues we have in terms of scalability are bandwidth issues. Bandwidth issues at the airport and bandwidth issues for some of these protocols we're talking about, ADSB, remote ID. That's great. We want to scale. ADSB falls down. Once you have 700 aircraft in that same area, all of a sudden we can't support ADSB anymore. Remote ID falls about the same kind of space. These are all the concerns for really, once we get into high gear, that we need to consider as we move forward. And the other big part of the airport is the human side of it. Professional development, workforce development, most of the GA aircraft that are the airports that are the renaissance for what we're talking about, they are themselves understaffed, they are undertrained, and the last challenge that we see with general aviation, and it's going to spill over into AAM and the drones, is the community challenges with noise. We have voluntary noise programs. The pilots have to adhere to voluntary noise programs. Everybody has to work together. Everybody needs each other. And right now, there's a lot of friction in that space. And we need to consider how we take the unique signatures of a drone and the flight characteristics and tracks of a drone and plan ahead for what the neighborhoods and communities are going to experience so we can proactively grease the skids for that.
Great. So Scott, I'm going to change it up again. So we just recently completed the Virginia AAM pilot site. At that pilot site, we had mixed mode traffic, so we were operating drones in the vicinity of the airport, in fact, on the airport. Now, it's interesting, we talk about drone 814 here. We have made a point of keeping the UAS away from the airport, not dealing with that problem. But in Virginia, we decided let's go head on and tackle that problem. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that we did in that project to try and keep the drones and the traditional traffic deconflicted?
Yeah, sure.
A small question.
Very, very simple problem to solve, and that's why we're all here. No, we deployed numerous multimodal sensor arrays in the general vicinity of Stafford Regional Airport. And in doing that, we leveraged both ADSB and remote ID, but also optical detection and modular radar detection. We have not dug into the track fusion problem yet. That is daunting, to say the least. But what we were able to do is show the different levels of viability of these sensor types in a given airspace with both crewed and uncrewed traffic. And we now have a nice big chunk of data to look at and say, wow, this sensor works just like the manufacturer said it did. Or, wow, this one doesn't work like the manufacturer said it did, et cetera. We then, go back and iterate with the manufacturers who are fans, I think, more or less of what we're doing because we're not letting perfect be the enemy of good, and we're putting their stuff in the real world to try to solve these problems, which ultimately boil down to everything that goes up has to come down safely.
And you talk a little bit about some of the UTM integrations that we did and what we learned from doing that.
Oh, yeah. Well, in addition to this being, a regulatory problem and a hardware problem, it's a software problem, more so than I think any other aviation problem now with all of these disparate systems and everybody's backyard now becoming a airport. We were able to integrate and prioritize uncrewed flights based on the type of flight between different UTM and USS and SDSP systems. That's a lot of acronyms, but basically saying the secondary data along with the FAA data and the flight description and data and type data was able to be shared across multiple systems, and then flights were reprioritized in real time based on the type. So if we catalog the flight as an emergency flight versus a burrito and coffee delivery, that would get bumped, and the other flight would then be prioritized and be cleared to fly.
Thank you, Scott. And so, Craig, you talked about the MVI concept that we've been kind of pioneering at ATAA, right? And part of that concept stems from the fact that you can build everything from very basic infrastructure, right? An ADS-B receiver and some UTM, up to very high-end SRC and Raytheon radars, right? And the infrastructure really needs to scale to what you're trying to accomplish, partly because, I don't think this comes as a shock to anybody, money's tight, right? I thank our Representative Rigby and Senator Langerholtz and our federal delegation for the funding that we have here in Johnstown. But man, what we couldn't do with like a whole shoestring, right? So, we've taken that funding and really used it very judiciously. So I know, Craig, that this is a conversation you and I have had, and it's front and center for New Air. How do we think about how to get the economic model right for this?
Great question. And I've loved your concept of minimum viable infrastructure. What's needed now to get the operations that you need going? The other point I loved earlier in the opening session was reference, I can't remember exactly who made it, but it was interstate in the sky. We've been looking at models in New York and other places as we roll out infrastructure and say, hey, there's an economic development benefit here, and the state bets on that, and I heard a lot of economic development talk here earlier. And then you look at some of the DOT budgets for highways, and these budgets are billions and billions of dollars, and it's massive. So when you look at those to what the infrastructure we're talking about for beyond visual line of sight flying corridors, whether it's 10, 20, $30 million, it seems insignificant. So what are the models? What are the public-private partnerships to enable operations in larger metropolitan areas or between cities for AAM? Those are the things we've been looking at and talking about, John. And I think there's absolutely a play with states, and I think every state will be different. If it's next generation transportation infrastructure that creates economic activity, and you look at the more mature model for roads and highways and the billions that are spent there, it seems like there's a reconciliation point in the middle there for infrastructure in the sky. It's more challenging to get your arms around. You can't necessarily see it all and touch it all like you can a road.
Right.
But it's absolutely leading to economic activity from drone UTM usage and then advanced air mobility, which is coming. So,
Anybody know what percentage of DOT projects, road projects, run over budget and over time? I don't know. I don't know. I'm asking. 110%? That sounds right.
From an infrastructure standpoint, these local communities have to make an investment for the corridor, for the airspace. But if you can dual purpose that fuel, dual purpose that charging station, dual purpose those kilowatt hours or that hydrogen, you're going to make a case for it in not just one corner of the market, not just the UAV, the UAS. You're going to make a market for it with other pilots on the airfield. You're going to make a corridor for it for the Tesla driver, that's needing a place to charge. If you keep your market open for multiple purchasers and not just a small niche community, you're going to have a better return on investment. And I know we're talking a lot about local levels and local investments, but there's federal dollars out there as well from the Inflation Reduction Act and the One Big Beautiful Bill that can help fund hydrogen generation, solar kilowatt hours in generation, and are across markets can be used and applied to different regions.
So, go ahead, Eric.
So it seems that there's an awareness issue, right? If somebody asks me for $1, I'll be hesitant, right? But if I know the cause and I see the big picture, somebody asks me for $100, I'll give it to them with a smile. So really, there's a lot of stakeholders in and around here, and we all need to be ambassadors to help accelerate awareness of the economic value and all the implications of those whole ecosystems to as many people as possible. And once we have that awareness, it'll grease the skids for the funding, I believe.
That's twice you've actually mentioned bribery.
So actually, for what it's worth, is Tom Chernisky still here in the room? No? Well, if he was, I would ask him, how much extra money does the county have for this? And the answer is nothing. So I think what's really important is we have to figure out what these applications are for UAS and AAM, and the infrastructure has to be driven towards things that are self-sustaining, that can wash their face, that deliver the social and economic benefit. I think part of the reason Drone 814 has legs is because no one's arguing with saving somebody's life, right? And we are comfortable investing in public safety and emergency services. However, there's a dollar point above which we don't invest, right? Pennsylvania has a very well-known problem with EMS, right? EMS is failing in the state, not because of the people, but because the financial model is broken. And so really thinking through that kind of economics of how this works and how you tie this together and how you make this thing self-sustaining is really critical. And I'll put in a plug for our 1:30 panel after lunch where we're going to talk about that some more. But in the meantime, I'm going to pivot. So we're going to do left to right again. So I'm going to start with you, Craig. I'm going to pick on you. So everybody on this dais here has experience putting equipment in the field, right? So give me two examples, give me one example of like the hardest piece of deploying this stuff. And the second one is the thing that surprised you.
I would say the hardest part of deploying ties back to the example you guys were just saying is getting out there. Perfect being the enemy of good enough. Especially take a radar, for example, and develop a new radar 10 years ago when I was at SRC with a great team. And it's designed and tuned to track drones, general aviation aircraft, and be used for a safety case with the FAA. That's all new, and that takes time. And getting it out there in the right environment, testing it, tweaking it, changing the waveforms, coming up with new modes, takes years. And the system now is outstanding. But the sooner you get out there in the right environment, absolutely the better. And what was the second question?
What's been the biggest surprise, the thing you didn't expect?
I think it's the kind of the Bill Gates piece. You do less than you're thinking in 1 year, 2 years, and a lot more happens in 10 years. Something as simple as even our Genius New York incubator up in Syracuse that we built with the corridor. Get the first couple cohorts going. We're through 9 cohorts now. The amount of teams, the amount of interaction from all of them, that's something that surprised me. And the person who framed it earlier, part 107 a decade ago to now, it's going to be really exciting what happens now because of those last 10 years.
Yep, I agree. I think that we're kind of poised. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, from like a sensor deployment perspective, I mean, I got to agree with you, Craig. The hardest part is just getting out there, but a different reason for why. And, here at Matrix Space, we kind of cut our teeth working with a lot of law enforcement and public safety and supporting drone as first responder programs. The amount of misinformation, both through popular culture and through other companies about what radars are capable of and what officers actually need to do their job is stunning. The popular culture side, I think we all kind of like watch shows and we just see little blips on a screen and we think that radars can detect everything. They absolutely can detect everything, but is that information useful? And so how do we configure the radars to actually be useful in those instances means that they become a bit more limited than I think a lot of people realize. So actually getting them out there in a way that's useful for the end users is tough. Trying to explain how a complicated technology that people get literal PhDs in to a law enforcement officer that is more concerned with busting people that are trying to do petty thefts and stuff, and trying to educate them on that is hard. The other part of it is there's a stunning amount of misinformation regulatory wise. Achieving BVLOS is remarkably complicated, and understanding things like RTCA requirements for ground-based surveillance systems, I would expect that there are probably only a very few handful of people in this room that understand even what that statement I just made actually even means, let alone, again, trying to explain it to a public safety officer and, again, how you actually implement this in the field. So, it is hard to try to actually get that information down to an end user so they understand the value of the technology that it can bring, the capabilities and limitations of that technology, and ultimately how it's going to benefit their programs. It's hard, and then you actually got to install it, which is its own, its own difficulty. The other part of this, and the most surprising aspect of this, is once you get this technology out there, there are kind of funny things that pop up with its capabilities and limitations, right? Like two examples, one from Matrix Space and one from my previous time at Iris Automation, right? Like so at Matrix Space, of course, we're picking up radars. Radars are really good at picking up moving objects that are made of metal. Really good at that. We did a deployment outside a prison. That prison had a train yard about a mile away. Man, did we do a good job detecting those trains and nothing else when the trains were going by. So, trying to adjust the radars to compensate for that was really difficult. The other thing too is, being at the edge of AI-enabled technologies, when I was at Iris Automation, we did a field deployment with a customer down in Florida. And this was a demonstration evaluation. They were like, guys, we're getting tons of false positives. Can you guys take a look at the system? And, we looked at it, and for those of you unfamiliar with Iris Automation or UAVionics, they manufacture vision-based detect and avoid systems. So using camera technologies to be able to look at the sky and say, okay, well, here are different objects, right? Well, all the false detections were on freaking dragonflies. That were flying up close to the cameras. So we quickly patched that. I'm not going to trounce my former employer. They're great. Love them and good technology. But for a company based in Reno, Nevada, there aren't that many dragonflies out in the deserts outside Reno. So the technology itself kind of responds in new and interesting ways when you actually get it out and deploy it into the field, whether it's things like trains or dragonflies with camera systems.
But back to why you deploy as quickly as possible. You couldn't plan for those, right? And
no.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, Corey.
From an infrastructure standpoint, my background is not on the radars and the drone detection. It's on the energy. It's on the fuel. And I think understanding and educating a client who's potentially purchasing this, understanding them on what is a potential return on investment? What is a potential ROI on the project? Are we looking at 5 years? Are we looking at 10 years, 20 years? Is the infrastructure going to be around for the life of its return? And to be able to educate them on the purchase of it, to be able to get ready for this. And honestly, I think the biggest challenge that we face is education to the public and education to the officials that get to make the decisions. Because the FAA is great at making checkboxes and having SOPs, and this is not something that falls into their normal SOP. This is not something that falls into their normal process. And I've had the FAA come in and tell me that I was doing a project for the airport that I needed to do a land release. And I'm like, why? A land release is when someone else owns a system. The airport is the one paying my bill. The airport is the one installing this infrastructure. I would go as far as to say that it should be funded through the AIP program. That got some reaction. But I tried. And then educating the public about what it does, right? A lot of our projects are using hydrogen fuel generation, or using, renewable energy to augmentate what the grid can't provide to a remote airport that's providing these resources. And understanding that the local zoning is built off of, let's say, legislation or opinions that could be fear-mongered, or as my son likes to say, race-baited. I don't know what that means, but I guess it's in someone else is instigating you to make a decision without really have all the facts. But what happens to that system in 30 years? What is the value of that system? Is it still producing? Is it still usable? Does it have other end users to it? And educating both the public and the elected officials or the administration officials that are making the decision, that's what I think is one of the biggest challenges from my perspective.
Yeah, I guess I'll address this at two levels. One is at a high level, and the next one's a little geekier. but at the high level, the airports, we deploy our systems to these remote airports, right? And we rely on them to install it, to maintain it. So we deal with issues with respect to power and the power quality, conditioning, spikes that is terrible at the typical remote airports. Some education, they'll install our system, technology right near big switches and motors and high voltage systems for airport lighting, so there's educational components to it. The other side is on the IT side. Airports have terrible internet connectivity, and I'm being generous from those who have been there and done that, right? So they don't have the staff. We're typically talking to an airport manager who has to call his neighbor's kid over to do a basic Wi-Fi router, and they change things, and so that's been a big thorn in our side. I would say 75% of our work is helping the airports that we deploy at with our aircraft surveillance, ADS-B surveillance systems, with network engineering. So that's a big thorn. Getting a little geekier, down into the, and especially with the crowd with AAM and drones, low altitude, and the expectation around what is can be expected from ADS-B, for example. There's a lot of misinformation out there on all fronts about the accuracy of ADS-B, what it is, what it isn't. There's good, bad, and ugly. Then there's an engineering component. As you get down to low altitudes, you're dealing with topology issues, right? You're dealing with a lot of issues from signals bouncing off of buildings, that there's an engineering discipline to it, and then at the end of the day, there's an art to it, and at the end of the day, there's, you got to get out there and do it, and the unknown unknowns. We have the ADS-B, we have to hear from like the UAVionics folks. Those aircraft broadcast 5 watts of power, right? Sitting next to an aircraft that's broadcasting 150 watts of power using a different ADS-B protocol. So our systems have to, it's like trying to listen to somebody whisper at a rock concert, right? And get it all accurately. It's been a huge challenge that we thought would be easier 7 years ago, and we learn every week.
I like that analogy, the whisper at the rock concert. That's good.
That is good. All of these are great answers. I'll answer both as from a challenge and a surprise standpoint. I'll say the same thing as people, because people make things hard, and people also surprise you all the time. We put these sensor arrays on buildings generally owned by local government, meaning we're working with either an admin or a clerk at the county or city level to initially start talking about putting something on the roof. And that could be a school, could be a police station, could be a library. But you know, you're building relationships from that level all the way up to the funding side of things, where you're talking about either federal pass-through, whatever it might be. The thing that surprised me the most in putting all this stuff out there and working on these problems has been how people have leaned in so hard and been so supportive. You know, there's a lot of talk about privacy and concerns about privacy when it comes to this technology. I don't think that surprises anybody. But when 814 rolled out here, we only got, I think it was a few phone calls to local police.
One.
Was it one? Okay.
One phone call.
When someone saw the drone, and as soon they said, well, it's a medical drone. That was it. There's no issues. And we did many, many flights, and we got one call. And this has been something I've seen in other states as well when we roll out these pilot projects, and we do start putting the numbers in.
Yeah, the people aspect, I mean, so, you know, before we take some questions from the audience, I'll share my own perspective. I think the biggest, getting it out there is one of the biggest challenges. I think the other biggest challenge is operating it, right? This is not a VCR, I just dated myself, right? But, you know, this is actually, you have to watch this stuff, you have to monitor it, you have to maintain it, right? I mean, this is aviation equipment, and you have to operate it. To Scott's point about the people, I'll give two observations. Part of the reason Drone 814 is here in Johnstown, we never got a no. We've never had a no. At the state level, at the county level, at the locality level, at the borough level, we've never, the answer has always been, what can we do to help? And I put that in contrast, I won't name names or places, to a major health system in another part of the country where we offered basically to put surveillance at their hospital heliport. Very busy hospital heliport, right? You would think they would care about what's in the airspace around that. And I don't know if it was the lawyers or the risk management department or whoever said, no, we're not doing it, right? So now, it'll be interesting the first time that medevac chopper encounters a drone near the heliport. We'll probably get a panicked phone call, when can you put the stuff in? All right. We got a few more minutes. I'd like to take some questions from the floor. If anybody from the audience has a question, you got some serious experts up here. So anybody want to ask? Mr. Dusler.
Well, thank you so much. You all seem to get along really, really well up there. It's just interesting. And we're all have our stakeholder positions in this new form of aviation with drones and things like that. And clearly it requires a very high level, and John, Project 184, and you guys, just a spectacular, spectacular collaboration. If we're to advance aviation, how do you collaborate while at the same time preserving your own stakeholder position in these things? Because there's so many moving parts, there's so many new ideas. Do you think about that at all? Have you strategized about that?
Okay, so John's question is, how do you collaborate while also defending your stakeholder interests, right? Maybe I could call that a co-opetition question, right? Which is a very real reality in aviation. Anybody want to share any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it. So, the general theory behind how we operate at Matrix Space, how we operated at Iris Automation when I was there, is that a rising tide lifts all ships, which is there is enough room for us to be collaborating together without necessarily having to get into this cutthroat competition. And the reason for that is because we are operating within a really complex and nascent space, both regulatorily and also technologically. Even when we're talking about technologies that have been around for close to 100 years, in the case of radars, how these are being utilized, the different types of AI and integration that's happening with these different sensors. This is all very, very new. And one of my chief competitors right now is a company called Echodyne out of Washington State. And yes, we're pretty competitive with these guys, but at the same time, we actually do a bit of collaboration with them. And the reason why is because of things like spectrum deconfliction. We both manufacture radars that operate on the same frequency. We understand that, as new regulations like Part 108 take hold, it's very, very likely that we're going to have stakeholders and end users that may buy Matrix Space or Echodyne equipment. We both do a lot of business with the federal government, and it's not unlikely that our radars end up getting put out together. And so how do we ensure that there is a pathway for both radars to be able to operate? Because both these exist in space and out on the market right now, and we can't really cut each other out from the market. So instead, we have to find ways to make sure that there is a space for us to both be able to sell. So things like that yeah, I've talked with them. Yeah.
While also making sure not to collude in contravention of federal antitrust law. Yes.
One thing to pile on to your comments there, coming from the radar industry in the same space when I was at SRC and some other places, that's a perfect example. And both of those companies are going to be very successful. The market is massive going forward. You mentioned federal, you mentioned commercial, like we're talking here. You said you make your pithy statements and predictions. My prediction is both of those companies will be very successful moving forward because they have great products and they know how to innovate.
Yeah, and it's a great. I love the question too. It's a co-opetition's the best answer. It's a historical tension within aviation that's existed from the beginning. There's a requirement for harmonization. Everybody has to play together, right? But everybody also has to find their competitive edges and their differentiation. We all want to innovate, but there's a balance of innovation versus safety and certification, and those cycles that stifle that to some degree. So I'm fascinated by this by the pace of AAM and the drones and the pressure it's putting on traditional aviation and aircraft for addressing some of the legacy challenges with certification, additive manufacturing. I mean, it stems through the whole ecosystem. So I'm thrilled to see, because of the pressure and the scale of what we're talking about here versus the scale of general aviation and commercial aviation, orders of magnitude. Right. It'll produce a whole new level of pressure on the ecosystem that I don't have answers for, but it's going to be wonderful to be a part of that journey.
So,
yeah,
you mind if I jump in, Scott? 'Cause
Sure.
we're coming to time. I'm sorry, but I will add something to your question, John. So we manage a lot of deployments and projects. We work with 8 different USSs. We work with about 15 sensor vendors, about a dozen operators, multiple states, multiple localities. So it's, like I think we're probably like black belt cat herders. I will share 3 things that I've learned managing these projects, in our management of these projects, that I think work really, really well. Number 1 is know what you do. Know what you do. Because unless your name is Raytheon or Lockheed, you don't do it all. So I can tell you right now, I talk to a lot of the USSs, the PSUs, the sensor vendors. Oh, I do this, and I do this, no way. No way, right? Know what you do and focus on that, which then gives rise to the second piece about getting these projects done and done well, is what I call stay in your lane. Be really clear, right? So this is like with the EIPP, right? Be really clear what everybody's lane is, right? And make it clear that you got to stay in your lane. And if you don't stay in your lane, you're going to get bounced, right? And then number 3 is be nice, right? As we talked about, there's a bright future for this industry, but I would argue that the money is still tight, right? I mean, they're not raining cash down. And so there's this temptation to try and wander into somebody else's lane and grab some money. And again, if you do that, you only have to do it once, and no one wants to work with you. So if you know what you do, and you know what your lane is, and you stay in your lane, right, and you behave yourself, it's actually worked really well, because we've done projects like this VAMPS project, right, where we had 3 different USSs collaborating, right? And trust me, they don't wake up in the morning and say, how can I work with my competitor, right? That yes, they recognize, like Dan said, that they have to work together, but on the same note, everybody wants to be top dog. So I think those 3 rules tend to work well. So I think we're keeping you from lunch. So I'm going to do a final lightning round, 30 seconds, left to right, okay? What is the piece of infrastructure that we're going to need in 20 to 30 years that we don't see we need now, right? So give me the future, right? Like, is it a flying robot? Like, what is it in 20 to 30 years that we're going to say, oh, we really need a whatever?
Good one. Off the cuff there, it's going to be some mix of airborne and ground infrastructure put together in a very novel way. Don't know what it is, but it's going to be a mixture.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to basically, oh God, this is a hard question, but let me come at it from a different perspective.
You got 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, we need to basically we need to change our approach to how we manage data. So shout out to ATA and the public fixes that you guys, flight information exchanges that you guys are building, where essentially the risk we run right now is creating a balkanized system of data with incomplete airspace awareness, and over the next 20 years or so, basically creating hubs to aggregate that data so that people have a more comprehensive view of airspace to scale up their operations is going to be absolutely critical.
From an aviation industry, fuel system, electrons, hydrogen, et cetera, I would say an improved grid, an electric grid that's more sustainable, more renewable, less dependent on coal and fossil fuels, because we're not reducing the amount of energy we're consuming. We're increasing the amount of energy we're consuming. So we can't depend on legacy infrastructure.
Eric?
Wow. So over the next decades, we're going to have to integrate moving things from the ground through our solar system almost, right? Space, certainly.
I was going to say space elevators.
Man.
You can still say it.
I apologize to.
Keep going. Keep going.
Now I'm putting. I just like putting pressure on him. That's all. Yeah. Come on, something new. I knew what he was going to say. No. So how do you detect these objects? And with an increasing tendency, the overall concept of anything that's moving is size, weight, power, and cost. Right? The factors are all driving that down. They want to be autonomous, which means how do they talk to each other? But they got to be collaborative. So they got to talk to each other. How do we detect that? What ears can we put? What are our options out there for detecting, let's just say, moving objects in general from the ground up through space and tying it all together, harmonizing it all, managing the data and that communication side securely and resiliently so that when we lose pieces of it, nothing happens.
It's just like super ADSB across the board. Yeah. Right.
As somebody makes a living in ADSB,
Not by itself.
Yeah, it won't be ADSB.
I don't know. We don't know what we don't know.
Go ahead, Scott. That's it? You don't know? All right. Well, I'll make my prediction, and then we'll get off the stage, Glenn, and let people have lunch. So I actually think the thing that we're going to find out we need is traffic automation in your Class Delta and general aviation airports. If you actually look at what's going on in the industry, in the market, all the growth in operations, not enplanements, okay? Because enplanements don't change the risk profile. It's the number of operations in a given volume that changes the risk. All the growth in operations are happening in your Class Delta airports. They're going to happen in your GA airports. This is what AAM is all about. It's not going to happen in your Core 30, your Bravo, your Charlie, right? And you already look now, and you can look at busy GA airports, and they outstrip, probably half the FAA approach-controlled airports, right? And frankly, ATC, if we had the ability to staff it properly, those guys have their act together, right? I'm not worried about ATC. What worries me is the rest of the country, right, where we basically relied on self-organization on the radio. And as you start to bring in remote vehicles, autonomous vehicles, vehicles that don't fly like other things, like eVTOLs, right, we're going to need some new solutions for this. And so I think that's going to be the undiscovered country the next 30 years. So I want to thank you all for spending time with us. Great time. And Glenn will bring you up, and we can have lunch.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I need to shake hands. Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Corey. Thanks, Dan. Craig. Thanks, Jeff. So thank you so much. This concludes the morning part of the session. Lunch is available. Thank you to Balance and Balance at the Airport for an incredible luncheon. Enjoy the lunch. Restrooms are in the hallway and around the corner. If you need anything, please let an Aerium team member know. We're going to be doing a working lunch, so please grab your lunch. Do what you need to do, bio break, etc., and come on back, and we'll have a chance to hear from our NASA engineer. Thanks so much.